It will be dark now until next year, 2021. We need, say the experts, around 30 contact tracers per 100,000 people. CNN has learned that right now Florida has about 7, Arizona about 5, and Georgia as few as 2. Dr. Fauci now says...
Now is CNN Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. Sanjay Gupta. Sanjay, you heard HHS Secretary Azar tell me yesterday that the window to get this virus under control is closing. How long do we have, or might it already be too late?
Well, you know, it depends how you define too late. I mean, I think action is always going to be better than inaction at this point, but there's no question, Jake, as we've been talking about, you and I, since February and March, that the earlier you act, the better. I mean, if we're thinking about this as a metaphor of a body and you're treating a cancer or something, you want to treat early. We've been waiting, and there's been spread of this infection now through the country, so it's going to require treatment. It's going to require more aggressive treatment in some areas versus others. You know, I think that at this point it almost becomes an existential question. What are we willing to tolerate in terms of people actually getting sick and possibly dying before we start imposing some of these actions? Jake, we know it needs to be done. We've seen it around the world. We have evidence that it works. We just need to apply some of these things here uniformly across the country.
One time, we were diagnosing people in the ICU after they came into the emergency room. And thanks to the millennials who have been heeding our guidance, they have been coming forward and getting testing. And so whereas before we told them to stay home, now we are telling them to be tested. And this is a great change for us because it allows us now to find the asymptomatic and the mild diseases that we couldn't find before. As Dr. Redfield talked about yesterday, from the serology test, we have a great understanding of what was happening in March. And the number of asymptomatic and mild conditions that led to individuals to have antibody, but never come forward with significant disease. And the work that's being done on clotting research by the NIH. But really, this disease is tackled community by community, testing at the community level. Working with community groups to understand the spread in those communities. And so we've spent the time to really map this epidemic and new positives down to the level of communities to understand where spread is occurring so that we can match our prevention interventions to those areas. Brings together what we just talked about, rising cases with an understanding of test positivity. Those are the states that we have concerns about because of the rising number of cases and the rising test positive. This explains the extent of community spread. In states that have increasing cases but falling test positives, it tells us that they're getting into the communities to find the asymptomatic cases. And so these are the things we put together to understand the full picture. Next slide. And so this is how we continue to integrate data on cases, data on testing, and data on hospitalizations so that we can work with the states for a comprehensive integrated response. Next slide. You can see throughout May, after opening, their test positivity continued to decline as their testing increased. It was in the last 2.5 weeks that we saw this inflection of rising test positivity along with rising testing. But it was the increase in test positivity that alerted us along with the increased cases, that this was becoming an alert.
Now, when you look at the map, it's very interesting because you see some dark parts of the map and some light parts of the map. We have a very heterogeneous country. But heterogeneity does not mean that we are not intimately interconnected with each other. So what goes on in one area of the country ultimately could have an effect on the other areas of the country. So let's take a look at this problem that we're facing now. We can't get away from that. It's interconnected. So therefore, if we are an interconnected society, we've got to look at the fact of what our role is in trying to put an end to this. I just want to bring this out without making it seem that anybody's at fault. You have an individual responsibility to yourself, but you have a societal responsibility. And think about that this is part of a process that we can be either part of the solution or part of the problem. So I just want to make a plea with people when they understand the stress that they're under as we try to tackle not only those states, but the light-colored part of the country, even though they've done well. They are vulnerable. Sooner or later, even ones that are doing well are going to be vulnerable. So we need to take that into account because we are all in it together, and the only way we're going to end it is by ending it together. Thank you.
We cannot defend freedom abroad by deserting it at home. Good night and good luck.